Hello, everyone. I don't know if anybody will be joining, but I welcome you to this live stream. It was very random and unplanned because I just recorded a 45-minute video in which I went through the information I'm about to present to you today. Pretty quickly, I paused and then I would read more and more, and it ended up being 45 minutes, but then my VEED program, which I recorded it on, conked out. So I'm having to do this. It didn't save the recording and I lost it completely. So I just had breakfast and did my thing. And now I am getting ready to do this for a second time. So welcome. And today's video is the connections of aliens and fairies. And I know if you're wondering, well, what do these two things have in common? A lot of people wouldn't think so, and either did I, until I did some research over the past few months. If you've been following on my videos with nature spirits and elementals, unseen beings, and just the dimensional beings in the unseen realms, rather, then this is kind of a accumulation point, kind of where I've taken the connections I've made over these videos and it's led me here, which we've gone basically full circle again with things, which, this morning I was pretty overwhelmed, like shocked, not like crying or upset or anything, just very, I didn't expect that. But they do say that when you go looking for the truth, if you look hard enough, you will often find it. But then sometimes you will not like what you find. And it's not necessarily that I don't like it per se, but it doesn't make me feel very comfortable. I will say that. So, because I do disapprove and oppose deception, as I've been saying this entire time. And I do believe that there are other beings out there who do also. So, right, these beings are alien, but alien to us in a way as in foreign. And it is because we have forgotten them. And as I said in my last videos, that it seems that they might be upset about that or have an ulterior motive or agenda. I'm not here today to point fingers or to spread negativity. This isn't an attack on anybody, because I definitely did not expect what came to be out of it. I had just finished up a video which comes out on Tuesday. I just need to move this. Okay. I just did a video that it will come out on Tuesday, and it is about the dimensional being Dogman. And after that, I had planned to do more about fairies, because we talked about fairy rings and portals and people being abducted and taken away and stuff like this, and how there are a lot of similarities between some of our folklore historically all throughout the world. People have different interpretations of it, but either way, it seems to match up. Like, different people will have like little people and gnomes and fairies, sylphs, nature spirits of different kinds. People will have different names and words for them within their cultures, but they do, it does all refer to the same thing. And it's brought me back to the old world, the antediluvian age, which I also did not expect. So let's begin. Salem's come to say hi. Hi, bud. That's Mommy's sweater. Hey, come here. Come here. Come here. I can't move it because I'm at the perfect angle now. Come here. There he is. Well, we'll see him in a second. Okay, so let's just begin. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tabs to get through. So, and we're going to get through those pretty quickly. They're not like super, super long, and I'm only reading some segments from each of them. So we're just going to get through that, and then we're going to talk a little bit more as we go. It's a shame because I'm just hoping that I will remember. I've organized everything pretty well, so let's begin. Salem needs kisses. Okay. I love you. Yes, I love you. I love you. You give kisses. Okay. There you go. Good boy. I love you. Some more? Oh, okay. I love you. You are loved. Want some more on this side? Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. You give me a kiss. Oh, good boy. Here you go. That's how he likes to give kisses. Okay. So, confidence kisses. All right. So, the first part here is from a website I came across while reading one of the forms that I got some of my information from. So here we go. So the origin of the Fae world. That's right, Salem. When the worlds were created, the primordials sorted its essence and counted out everything that they deemed too bright and too dark. So these essences or energies came to be known as the Faerie, 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 and the Shadowfell. Parallel worlds that were intertwined to, like, they're linked. I can't say this word. Inextricably linked. Oh, I said it right. To the prime material plane. So it brings me back. I didn't even erase this yet, which is funny. I just left it like this since I did my last video with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and the symbology with that. But what they're talking about is the fairy part would be what is light and what is dark, separated from the material plane. And if you remember about Preternia, this is the ones that came before, right? The higher dimensions, right? And these are the lower dimensions, or this is inner earth. Sometimes you hear about inner earth, right? This is what they mean by subternia. So they separated the light and the dark, what is light from what is dark, into the fairy world and the Shadowfell. Sometimes it'll be called Asuraville, the lower dimensions, Asuraville, because the Asuras are lower dimensionals, right? But the lower dimensionals are also elementals because they're in kind of this world more linked with us, as the higher dimensional worlds are more free of these more denser places, you know, because they still, I think they may still have, you know, similarities to more of nature, but then some of our what's this, traits, right? So traits of like animals and things like that. So in nature it would be, you know, the survival of the fittest and the strong and predator prey and things like this. And we don't really have that as much, except for it's more of mental battles and battles of will with humans and stuff like this. So there are similarities between us, but it matches up with other explanations, you know, whether it be, you know, as I mentioned with the Asuras being the lower dimensionals, with Buddhism and Hinduism and such, with, you know, having the dimensions being separated, it mirrors over, like it kind of reflects historically throughout different civilizations. But we just have different words for it, like we have different languages. So it continues on to say, the creatures who inhabited the Faerie occasionally passed into the prime material plane. And it is from these lineages that we have elves and other Fae creatures. During this time, there was just Faerie, with a fairy queen and king, and all inhabitants lived in this city of everlasting change. One could say they were the original court. Remember all this. It was with the aliens, courts, councils, and stuff like this. One day there was an uprising, like when the Fire Nation attacked. Groups of Fae no longer wanted to be part of the entirety of the Fae. They wanted to hold a hierarchy of their own, thus branching off from the Faerie. These Fae were the beginning of the unseelie court. Several wars were fought, and soon Faerie was lost. In its place, Feyworld began, but it's Faewyld began. The overlap with the prime material plane waned with the passing ages. At one time, like I said, it wasn't making sense to me what I remembered about the antediluvian age. Because I thought to myself, all these beings, we live together, so the spiritual worlds and the material worlds must have overlapped. Remember how I said the Vesica Pisces, the two circles, and it's like the material plane and then the spiritual plane, and the mystic is in the middle, that symbol there? This is what we're talking about. The Vesica Pisces, it overlaps the two worlds, and creation comes to being, like to create something new. So that's what I've just seen. Okay, waned. So it's like I said with the Aether, it kind of lessened with the passing of the ages. What's up? What's the matter? Come here. Did you have a bad dream? Come on down. What? Come on. Wee. Hi, baby. What's the matter? Hi. Mervin says hi, everybody. She announced her presence. Okay, with the passing ages, and the Fey world drifted from the realm it mirrored. It was no longer common for children to wander between the roots of large trees and find themselves in new lands, like my last video with portals. But some small villages along certain magical ley lines, the town I live is on the ley lines actually, powerful ones, do still report these occurrences. So some small villages along certain magical ley lines do still report these occurrences. Some creatures also have the unique ability to pass between worlds. Like I was telling you with the video that is coming out on Tuesday. This one was supposed to be after the Dogman video, but you will see a dimensional being in there. The fella even says it looks like a werewolf, but I'm pretty sure that it is not technically what is defined as a werewolf, okay? But it is something that people would most likely say werewolf, because this would be where their word knowledge would be, and that's fine. It doesn't make you an idiot, okay? But it just means that, you didn't know. There's lots of things we didn't know, like I did not know this, okay? And we're going to get to all of this. Okay, I am digressing. So, a unique ability to pass between the worlds, either through their own power or through a natural ability to find bridges between the planes. Highborn Fae are commonly referred to as Sidhe, Sidhe. It is important to address them as such when referring to them, if not using their official title. When I read that word, okay, because I had started off this at one of my links called Why Do Fairies Kidnap Humans? And then there was another one, Tell Me Everything You Know About Fairies, Working with the Fairies, an Irish Perspective. And so in fantasy, I occasionally see the trope, fairies cannot lie. But this is the one that it was Tell Me Everything You Know About Fairies. Okay, so I found this link here. The point of me mentioning all this is when I read Sidhe, Sidhe, I got an intuitive ping. Okay, I got an intuitive ping. And I had a feeling that I had heard that word before. And it brought me back to Elena Danaan. I searched her name with that word, and it came up with something from 2021. From May 5th, 2021, it was a live Q&A special about Inner Earth. So May 4th, so the day before, May 4th, 2021 at 11 p.m. GMT. So, Elena Danaan, as I have said, the lower realms, sometimes in the earth, like gnomes and different things like this would be Subternia, inner earth, and the lower dimensions, okay? And some people, yes, would see this as hell, because Skeletor is like the leader of hell, basically. Okay. So it says here, Archelios, wizard of the Sidhe. And as we just read, that is a species of Faerie. These beings have been with us for a long time, and they came before us. I've even connected this to the Jinn. It gets really good. So Elena says, tonight I'm going to speak about Inner Earth. I have one of my guides whose name is Archelios. He is living in Inner Earth. He's in the 4th density, and he's been looking after the bloodline I'm incarnated into as well since a very long time. So hence the name Danaan. Okay? I think she changed her name to that. All right, for starters. And the bloodline thing, I've traced this back to the TUATHA De Danaan, which goes to the Shining Ones, which goes to the Anunnaki, which is the 5th dimensional beings, okay? Which would be aliens. She goes on to say, first, I'm going to connect to Thorhan by telepathy, and he's going to guide me. You can talk to these beings. I'm saying this is me. You can talk to these beings with your pineal gland. That is your alien implant, okay? Elena goes on to say, our connection is very special. We are connected first by a device that I have in me, but not only. She has no device. This is your pineal gland. That's your alien implant. Our link grew so strong that the device is just here to secure the connection. But we speak now directly, also by telepathy, and sometimes with the link of the heart. Yes, because prayer, like I said to you before, praying is a connection of the heart. And as long as you have the right frequency, energy, and vibration, you will reach the source that you wish, okay? Most of the time, especially if you have pure-hearted intentions. But you got to realize that there are a lot of beings out there that have never been human and don't understand what it's like, and have still, after all this time, a great amount of envy that we replaced them and they had to step aside. Do you understand? Even they say this about the jinn in Islam. This is the story of basically Satan in Islam. I'm not an expert at this. I'm trying my best to remember everything I can. It's either the shaitan, or it means the adversary. So what happened was there was a jinn that rose to the rank of angel, rose through the spiritual hierarchy by good deed. Yes, changed and made good deed and all that, and rose through the I just got a flash of the Monkey King. So kind of how the Monkey King joined heaven, and they were messing with him and put him as the stable master and stuff like this, okay? If you've watched these movies that I suggested and know the story of the Monkey King with the Dragon Emperor and him going to the Celestial Palace and stuff like this, then you'll understand the reference. And I'm sorry if you don't. I've always suggested for people to do as much research as possible, and this is why I post all my sources, links, and information in the description and the pinned comment of these videos. I may have to go back a few for my last live because I forgot to update that one with the links, but I will. But this is what I usually do, okay? So I always encourage you to do your own research, because this is the only way you're going to make sense of things for yourself. This is the mistake that I made, that I just took other people at their word and listened to what they had to say instead of doing my own research, as they say, yes? So about the connection with the pineal gland, because this is how we do the telepathy thing, okay? You can do this in your waking body, but you can also use this ability during your dream time in your spiritual life, okay? And so, this is why a lot of people will have experiences where someone's talking to them, but their mouth is not moving. This is telepathy. This will even happen sometimes with people in ghost encounters, because what you're encountering is a dimensional being, and they most likely, because they don't have a physical vessel, they will communicate this way also, okay? But there is no special device. As I said, it seems to be that they raise themselves up. Again, she is an ambassador of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and the only one apparently to her. So I just want to pause and say that it had to be something else for me. You see, I needed there to be aliens at the time. Not that, it's something that I made up. It was something that I thought had to be, because there had to be something else out there other than humans. And I've had a terrible experience, and I don't mean to offend people. You see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to offend you. It's just that if you know some of what I've talked about with my life, I really had a miserable experience with human beings. And I remember from a very young age, I just wanted all the evil in the world to be gone. And I started to pray for that. And, a lot of that had to do with evil people like my parents, right? So there's a lot of things that are coming together for me with this. But I will leave this below, because I don't think there's any more that I really need to go over with this. There might be a little bit here. Let's just go down and see. There was something about what policy of non-aggression. I'm almost there. About prisoners. Okay, because this caught my eye, because the question she is asked is, what happens to the reptiles who actually surrender on the ground? Are they taken aboard of ships and relocated? Where do they go? The Galactic Federation of Worlds has a policy of non-aggression. When they come at the rescue of a population like the population on Terra at the moment, with a certain level of civilization, they try not to cause damage when there's a war, when they need to intervene to save this population. They're going to do their best not to harm them. Okay. So that's why they use the strategy at the moment, getting all the moles from undergrounds of Earth, Mars, and things like that. Things like that. And they use strategy a lot, and that's what drives their hand mad sometimes, diplomacy. No, he likes strategy. He likes that. He likes that more and more. So the policy is do not kill first ever. Always offer the choice. Yeah, I do. Free will, always, always. I'll tell them straight up, like, if you don't do this and surrender, and this is the way it's going to be, well, then we're going to do it the hard way. So you can either choose the easy way, and we'll, do things pleasantly, and you can return to your home and blah, 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 rehabilitation, or whatever it is. That's not my business. But, yeah, the apprehension sometimes does go like that. And I always give them a choice for you just ice somebody. So I recognized the similarities. Again, this has to do with the spiritual hierarchy. But what caught my attention was this. Thorhan works on one of the orbital stations of the Federations, and I've seen the cells and the prison level. It's like pods. The electromagnetic field that contains these spots and the prisoners that are inside, and they are taken to places. There's a kind of there are worlds like artificial planets. They are prison worlds, but in fact, that's very interesting, and I think we have a lot to learn about that. It's because it's being transcripted, okay? So I'm having a difficult time following along, but the point is about the electromagnetic field that contains these spots, spaces in between spaces. That's what it reminded me of, okay? So you can read all of this if you like. I mean, it is somewhat comforting to know that there may very well be, like I said, this group of superheroes that are doing, like I refer to them as, okay? Good people, people that want the best for all in the universe and other ones, okay? In the multiverse. But just the way it's being done, I just still have an uneasy feeling, okay? And so I'm going to keep going and we're going to discuss this, and I will leave it in the individual's hands to decide what you want, because I would like it if all beings, like I said, I would love it if us and the aliens, like kind of like Star Trek, we could all live together and get along. Although even with Star Trek, there were problems, you know, with the species coming together. And that's what I mean. Like in the end, I remember that there was a lot of wars and a lot of battles, and we were all killing each other and stuff like that. It was really bad. So I'm not saying that it's negative. It's just that, like, I always had that feeling that the spirit realm is a bit angry with us because we forgot them. And I even got very confused because as I'm listening, they're telling me stuff about aliens, and I'm like, well, I've met stuff like this, but they never told me they were aliens. You know, this is spirit realm stuff. And so it was extremely confusing for me. So let's just see. Okay, so we read this part. Okay, so we'll just continue about that one first website. And this is the second part on it. It says Fae factions, because you hear in Elena's book here that there are other beings and people that have decided not to join this Galactic Federation of Worlds because they don't agree and things like this, and so they've gone off independently. Okay, so it says denizens or citizens of the Fae world are usually referred to as Fae. These tricky, magically infused creatures are as dangerous as the environment they have been shaped by. Because this is the thing I said, you have to be able to adapt to change very quickly, mentally, emotionally, and sometimes physically. Because the environments that you're in, a lot of the time, will change according to your thoughts and feelings about what you think they are. The beings around you are telepathic and know how you will think and feel, know your likes and dislikes, your weaknesses, and your deepest desires, and you best believe they will use them against you. They will use that against you. I've been dealing with this in the spiritual realm. A lot of the time, I remember it happening in like any kind of action way, like I wrote in my book, in the dream time. But I realized that I'm some like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's what I made about. There is a, oh damn it, I ruined the joke. But in my Dogman video, I'm pretty sure I've used the Buffy picture before. But anyway, so moving on. Let's see. Okay, so the environment is shaped by, yes, thoughts and feelings like it expresses in Avatar Korra, when I showed you that clip where she gets upset and things start to change and go darker. So they're telepathic, they'll know how you think and feel, and this is how they will manipulate you, sometimes turning into people that you love, your dead loved ones, to have an emotional reaction, even just to get you to run to them. And then once they have you in their arms, you're in big trouble, okay? Because they'll probably, well, one of my last pages is called Fairies Weren't Always Cute. They used to drink human blood and kidnap children, okay? Well, that escalated quickly. Yeah, it does. I've connected this to cattle mutilations because it says sometimes they will blight cattle, but they also, if you treat them well, they will protect your herd. So, or they'll, decimate your animals. But sometimes it seems like they also, some of them will eat flesh. And so they might be eating the animals. The animals may even be a sacrifice to these beings in some sense, or they take it as one. They just take it as one, even if it's not offered. In exchange, yes, because nothing is given for free, and we will read that in the pages to come. So, one of the most dangerous parts of the Fae is that there are few truly dim-witted creatures amongst their ranks. So they're very intelligent, like it says in my book here. Okay. So, amongst their ranks, even small woodland creatures can exhibit intelligence similar to that of an adult humanoid. As with most intelligent creatures, Fae of similar mindset and ideologies have banded together to form a number of powerful factions, like the Galactic Federation, in the Fae world. Some, like the Seelie and Unseelie courts, and that's why you always hear about aliens having courts and councils, are made up of Fae creatures that are native to the Fae world. These factions are led by extremely powerful, god-like creatures called Arch-Fae, or Archangels, or Anunnaki. Okay, this is my commentary with it. Other factions consist of creatures that have migrated to the Fae world and made it their home. These creatures have been shaped by their time in the Fae world. So if you eat the food there, first of all, you're stuck there, and you will start to change like the world you're in. I'm seeing this. Do you remember on Pirates of the Caribbean when the fish crab people were all trapped on the ship, Davy Jones' locker, Davy Jones. And when you're on there, you start looking like a fish person. They start getting shark heads and claws and shit like this. They're in the water environment and they start to change like the environment around them. Like this, for example, that's what I just saw. Okay. Before, about the highborn Fae, about replacing humans. I was seeing before about in Lord of the Rings when the elves go into the West and then humans are now the lead race in Middle Earth. Do you remember that happened? So that reminds me of when the worlds drifted apart and the elves, went into the West and gave humans rise to power. Okay, that's an example from Lord of the Rings. All right, so to finish this up, it says, other factions consist of creatures that have migrated to the Fae world and made it their home. These creatures have been shaped by their time in the Fae world, causing them to lose traits passed down by their ancestors and adopt more Fae-like mannerisms. So what I was saying about Davy Jones' locker and the fish people on the ship. See, this is why I was trying to make a video, because I could have used pictures and examples. But if you haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean, it is the third one the second one. Darn it. But anyway, it's one of the series. I'll post it down below so you can see the example from the trailer and you'll see the fish people. But this would be the underwater realm. And of course, they'd start looking like fish, okay? Because this would be, even though it's not like underground, under the ocean is also the lower realms, okay? Because it's above Middle Earth, like underwater. So technically, it would be a lower dimensional realm, all right? So we're going to move on to the next page, which would be, let's go to tell me everything and anything, or anything and everything you know about fairies. Okay, but I want to read to you first, just really quick, about the fifth dimensional entities, okay? Just to refresh the memory about that. Just went past it. The fifth dimension. This is the plane of existence populated by intelligent entities that have never existed in the third dimension, never been living here on the third plane. Being closely associated with the third dimension, entities in the fifth spiritual dimension can interact with us easily, influence our thought patterns, circumstances, and or the elements around us. In religious text, these entities are referred to as demons or fallen angels. So Christianity has named everything demonic like this. Islam calls it all the jinn, okay? But the fallen angel, again, if you are here in the fifth dimension, oh, sorry, I can't see myself. If you're here in the fifth dimension and you go down to the third, what are you doing? You are descending or falling, right? So that's, you know, that's what that would be. So if you leave your space and come down to the material plane, technically that's what they label you as, you know? Okay, so moving on. See, I could have almost done it in 45 minutes. We're only at 37 minutes. Okay. So again, tell me anything and everything you know about fairies. So we're just going to read this page here. These are just comments and people adding their information. Okay, so use your discernment. Take what, I'll give a little bit of commentary, but we'll just take it for what it is and use it for research purposes. Okay, so here we go. One of the things is that Joan of Arc was accused in her trial of being in league or under the influence of fairies. She acknowledged that, as a child, she and other girls would dance around and hang garlands and on an old tree near their village, which they called a fairy tree. When asked by the prosecutors whether she ever saw a fairy, she replied she wasn't sure. The Fae are the Fae are an ancient and powerful race. They used to rule this planet before they got replaced by humanity. They live in a parallel world to ours that overlaps in a whole bunch of places. It's possible to stumble into their world on accident. A lot of them are missing 411 or a lot of the missing 411 cases happen like that. Sorry, some of these aren't written very well. Moreover, there are thousands of species of Fae, some of which are predatory and others are more friendly, and others still are incredibly dangerous for completely different reasons. So like I was saying with the missing 411 cases last time, is that, you know, some of them people will return unharmed, but sometimes not, right? It says, okay, we gotta keep going. I read once that one of the most rare and powerful Fae will appear as a pigeon. Something about that just makes sense. So the thing about it is that I've heard that too about them turning into animals and visiting you. And the other day, I'm not like trying to like pull at strings or whatever you call that here, but The cats almost killed a mouse the other day, and the mouse came back twice, even after almost being murdered, and I saved it twice. And it trusted me right away. I went and I held it for a little while, and it just slept in my hand a bit. And then I decided, like, I can't keep him. Like, I got to put him outside. And so I went, and he was okay. He was alert. He wasn't injured. He just really needed to rest. And he was just a young mouse. And I don't know if it was male or female, but I put it out in the flower pot outside. It's a large flower pot in the flowers underneath, so no one could see him. He was like underneath where all the flowers were growing, so he was at the bottom of it, just lying. And he sat there and he made a little space for himself, and he lied down. He went to sleep. A few hours later, I went out there. He was still there. I literally put my hand out and he crawled into it. I'm like Snow White right now, okay? And he crawled into it. And I brought him over and I put him into a safer place because the sun was coming over, and I put him into a safer place, and then I just left him be. And I haven't seen him again. And I actually saved a pigeon in my old building. Sorry, I feel like there's a mosquito biting me on my back. I left the balcony door open, so if you can hear the rain, it's raining really nicely and the cats are outside playing. But anyway, so there's the thing about the mouse, and I saved an injured pigeon once, and I've always had a connection with animals. Oh, my cats are fighting now. Well, not actually fighting, but having a wrestle. So if you hear that, that's what that is. Hey, 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 Salem, Salem, Salem. Hey, 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 run, Marin, run. You're just sitting there biting her on the cheek. And she's like, argh. Anyway, she's fine. So, I forgot to mention to you, like, how it's expressed here and how there's, like, animals and stuff in the trees and whatnot in the higher dimensions here, right? This is Middle Earth, the material plane, in the lower dimensions. Right? But look, there's, like, animals and stuff in there. So, okay, before I get too sidetracked, okay, about the pigeon. Okay, I don't know much, but I'll tell you what I've learned to be the truth. Never, ever give them your name. And they will just ask, like it's a conversation. And it's true, and it's strange, because when they ask me my name, I always give them the name Nova. Because I thought that's like my alien name or whatever. I didn't actually know that I was protecting myself. It must have been like maybe my subconscious or higher self doing that. It says never say thank you to a fae. They are not tiny or small or slight in any way. They're humanoid beings that pack a punch in the power department. If you can't sense the power coming from a creature, you do not need to even be considering messing with them. What? Anyway, so usually you can sense the power and stuff like that from the being. It will let you know energetically to not mess around. You'll feel it like you're unwelcome in a space, that you're unwanted. That's them warning you, okay? And they'll feel that, like you get a gut feeling like, oh, we shouldn't be here. Let's get out of here, whatever. Like that. They are pranksters, but their pranks are not mild. They tend to be very dangerous, for lack of a better word, to us. They don't understand human emotions like you would think. I always think of them like a mountain lion watching us in the woods. You may never know they are there, but if you allow them into your life, they will come and go as they please. They enjoy muddling up the waters, so to speak. But I mean that, I mean they love to come and mess things up and then sit back and watch how we react. Like how in 2017 they flew a UFO craft over my building and then just watched me go mental with it over all these years. Maybe that, who knows? Now, I'm not sure about how true this is, and I really, really don't want to find out. I've heard that there might be a type of fae that is darker, also known as meaner, than your typical normal fae. I haven't looked into it because I don't want to know something for certain that might not be something I am supposed to know. That's what the commenter says. But yeah, there are darker types of fae. Everything has a price, procedure, and norm. So that's what I was saying about the whole cattle thing, is that they will protect your herd, but in turn, they will expect to be fed. And that's one thing I've been saying, is like, we just don't interact with the spiritual realms as we used to. We don't give tribute to them in that way. And I don't mean by animal or human sacrifice. But I mean, if the human sacrifices are being done in that way, it's probably because some of these beings are super, super angry that they were replaced. A lot of these beings, like, I forgot to finish about the jinn in Islam. So the devil character, the adversary in Islam, rose to the rank of angel, would not obey when the being was told to bow to humanity, would not obey the divine creator. So this being was cast out, like how Satan was cast out or Lucifer was cast out. Yes, it's a similar repeating story, but it is because the beings did not want to, it's because of like pride, basically. Well, why would we bow to them when we have, these magical powers? And they have a whole different set of abilities and gifts that we just don't possess yet. We may some point due to our evolution, but I mean, they are the elder races, basically, our older brothers and sisters, and it kind of confuses me as to why they behave in this way. Yeah, you'd think that your older siblings would, want to teach you right and be good to you, but I guess not. They probably don't think of us like that. And I think that just what we'll read here today. Okay, let's just continue with the play on words things, because we're almost there anyway. So everything has a price and procedure. It's normal, not demanding sun and moon and nothing in return. So I talked about the cattle and like having being fed and how we're not giving tribute anymore. So that even means like fruits and vegetables and small trinkets that you made, that you put in a basket or something and you take out to the middle of the woods and then you leave it and you walk away. And you don't think about it. You leave it for the fairies, basically. They used to do this stuff. And like I said, the spirit realm and the people, even like the indigenous peoples for a long time, and the peoples of the East, they still do that. They leave fruit and stuff like that in a bowl for their passed on loved ones on a shrine or altar. This is respecting the spirit realm and the spirits that have your ancestors within these realms, okay? That's what it represents. So, I'm getting a lot of information right now. So it's a soul wanting substance and form. So I talked about this before, where a lot of these beings will mate with humans to produce offspring and to gain souls. So with marriage with a mortal human, you can gain a soul and things like this. And I guess maybe join the material plane. I do not know for certain. Okay. Okay. So we're just going to move on because this is commented. The last thing that just says jumping blindly into a forest to learn. That is not a good idea. Okay. But I think this person may, not have English as a first language, or they might be speaking in a different, because it's just literally a couple lines. Anyway, so we're going to move on. Ben June, 4 months ago, this was all talked about. It says, don't trust them. One day, you might be the pet chicken. The next, you might be the chicken nugget. Do you understand? For dinner. And the thing about this part, it hit me that you've heard about people being like alien pets, okay? Well, sometimes they do think of us like that, as a source of entertainment, comfort, and things like this. Like how we feel about our animals, But you got to remember, they're like a lot older with it than us. And the fact that this kind of thing. I mean, maybe it's a way of teaching. I don't have any older siblings or younger that I have grown up with and have any experience with. So this part's difficult for me because I made the conclusion a while ago, years ago, that the Jinn are like the middle children. And with humans, like being the middle child, I hear sucks. Okay. So if anybody has experience about being the middle child, please share it because it can reflect about how these Jinn actually feel, right? They have the angels who are much older than them that are probably always putting them down and turning their noses. You see that within the celestial realm with some of those mythological Chinese fantasy movies that expresses the elemental kingdoms and such that I've talked about before, like the Monkey King. Wingardium Leviosa. Okay, sorry. It was just like my hand was up like this, like I'm gonna cast, some Harry Potter wizard spell. Okay, that's where that was from. I'm not casting a spell on you. Okay, so with the chicken nugget thing, yeah, there's been like talks about aliens and treating people like they're pets. Like, someone would think that maybe if my alien contact, I would be like the pet or whatever. And I've sometimes seen it in this way because they are older. And I mean, they had a lot of curiosity about what it was to be human. But then again, I thought that they were aliens from somewhere else because they wouldn't know and things like this. They didn't actually tell me they were, I assumed. So it's not a lie. It's manipulative, like how they say that the Fae cannot lie, but they can get humans to do it for them. We'll get there. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So one day you might be the chicken nugget. Because I said I was listening to stories where there was a girl who came across, it's called the Scary Fairy Godmother channel, I believe it's called. I know it sounds funny, but she gets people to write their experiences and send them into her, and she reads them on her channel, okay? I heard her say that this commenter sent this to me, and blah 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 blah. So that's what she's doing. So it'd be like me writing my experience about the Asura and sending it to her and her reading it, right? It's not like it's not true. It's coming from me being represented and spoken or read by this lady, okay? But anyway, on her channel, she talks about fairy romancers. And there was a girl who came across a fae in the woods. She wasn't sure, but she thought, and he had a picnic all laid out. And again, don't eat the food. We will get to those, I'm pretty sure. But again, don't eat the food. Do you remember in Pan's Labyrinth with that thing like this? And they tell her, don't you eat the food. If you eat the food, it wakes that thing up. And then you also get trapped there. They'll talk about this lots, that if you eat the food in these worlds, you get trapped there. Yes, that's a lot within folklore. You'll see this in movies and stuff like this. But there is truth to it. Because she kind of figured, but she didn't eat any of the food. She complimented it. And thankfully, one of her family members came by and literally says, like, grabs her by the hand and says, no, not today. You're not going to be eating her liver. And that's when she realized, like, oh my goodness. So because he hugged her, and he hugged her as if he wasn't going to let go. It was tight and it was uncomfortable for her. Like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, he got weird. Yeah, just listening to the experience. At first, it seemed all lovely, but then she even said he was holding on to me as it was almost suffocating. Like he wouldn't let go, and he wasn't going to let me go. Yeah, and she started to get nervous, So, yeah, I will again link everything below. So the next comment is, okay, that's where I got the website. Honestly, my knowledge of the Fae comes from the website. So we read about the website about the primordials separating the realms and stuff. Okay. And then it says, read the origins of midwayers in Urantia. Read Dimensions by Jacques Vallée. I think I know that book. It might be on my Telegram channel. So the last part is another testimony. This is 25 days ago. Yes, I have a very long history with them, the Fae. I was almost killed by an evil fairy or elf or goblin, whatever it was, because like I said, they don't know what it's called, but they will know what it feels like. And what you're about to hear is something that sounds like a parasitic entity like we hear about, okay, whether it be a reptilian or this or that, okay? Whatever it was, she says, it attached itself to my back, and they do that. The Jinn will do that. That's where I learned that from Simon Parkes. He even had a picture of that. But see, I'm not saying that Simon Parkes knows what he's talking about, because he's definitely a grifter, or he actually believes that stuff and he's being taken advantage of, these Fae. Like, they're taking advantage of him because he's having sex with aliens, remember? So, and he was, and he probably still is. And so there's these sexual encounters as well, which goes on a lot too with hybrids and things like this. They seem to be trying to create the ultimate being, and we will read that on one of these pages. I remember it. So let me just freaking finish. Okay, on my back. It attached itself to my back and kept getting heavier the more it fed on me. It fed off bad energy, as you hear this, right? And so it kept creating really unlucky circumstances for me, where I would in turn react negatively, crying, screaming, etc. And the more I reacted this way, the fatter and fatter it got. It got so heavy I could not stand. It folded my body in half, and I almost snapped my spinal cord trying to stand one day. It almost took me a while. See, what happens is, so this didn't probably actually, I probably felt like this. What happens is you get really, really depressed. I've noticed these symptoms with me, but now that I'm awakening to these things and I'm able to overcome them, you can recover. But it's almost just like a flea that's drinking your blood. It will drain your resources. So what was happening is that she probably got pretty weak, this person. It's the last comment. It's Goddess of Love 444, which again, those number things. But it means that angels are with you. So it doesn't mean that the numbers are evil. Like I said, I believe that it is the divine creator connecting with us. But then again, there's such a high level of manipulation going on out there. You know, people will go looking for the numbers and then think, oh, 444, 444, you know. So it's just a big confusing mess. Anyway, it says, she says, I almost snapped my spinal cord in half one day. It took me a while to figure out what was making it heavier. See, it fed off bad energy. She probably didn't know that at the time, right? She figured this out afterwards, and you learn, and then these things, well, you try not to let them happen again, okay? So it says, it took me a while to figure out what was making it heavier. Unfortunately, it had complete control over me. I was possessed. So a lot of the time it will seem like demonic possession, but it's not true demonic possession. And this is what I was saying before, where I remember Ken Wheeler was all about demonic possession. But true demonic possession, if you really want to go there, like I said, it's about energetic compatibility and the vessel. So it's almost like voltages. You can't use something with a certain voltage with another voltage that is not compatible, or you'll blow up the unit, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it won't work, especially not for long. You'll see sometimes represented in movies, if there is an entity in a host in which it doesn't belong, a lot of the time, one of two things will happen. If the spiritual host is too strong for the physical host, like if a demonic entity from the fifth dimension, okay, came down and possessed a human being, you would see this because the human's vessel would need so much food. It would be constantly eating all the time. And if it can't, the body would start to eat itself at a rapid rate, trying to maintain the balance between material and spiritual energies, okay? This is why a lot of the time it's only compatible for a very, very short amount of time. And you would need a powerful being to do something like that. So there are different cases. That's why it confused me. And I was like, no, just because somebody has a head twitch with a nervous system problem doesn't mean they have a fucking demon or whatever. That's not the case. You could have outside influences, but full on possession is quite rare. And it's you can deal with it. You can. So that's all I'm saying. Like the compatibility is wrong. And you'll hear sometimes where, and yes, there is psychotic like amnesia where you'll have, a traumatic amnesia or things like this but you'll hear cases where people will not remember murdering the person that they love the most. And, it's like something took over them and they don't remember doing it at all. And it's rare, but it happens. Okay. And I've heard cases like this. So it just depends. And you might have something like this where they'll do something and act out very viciously and horrifically and very shockingly. But they'll only have a short amount of time to do so, you see? So that's why they try to get as much done as possible. And so you'll have something like this, but true, full demonic possession, you would have to give permission to, for one thing. But let's just finish this. Sorry. I was possessed. It moved my body and my head in ways no human can move. It hurt me so bad. I screamed for hours and hours, days on end, months after months. For over 2 years before it finally came to an end. Yeah, they'll make you, with the jinn, they say that, it makes people seem like they have severe psychosis, all kinds of stuff. The jinn will make you sick. Same thing with, demonic activity and such. It's all connected. We just have different words. So I won't give any more details as this was extremely traumatic to me, the commenter says. But just know, yes, they are very, very real. And my advice would be, if you ever think you're face-to-face with one, a fae, you will be fine as long as you remember one thing. Do not disrespect it. Also, they like to clean at night and they like shiny objects. Okay? So I'm going to move on to we'll read this part. This part is called Working with the Fairies, an Irish Perspective. And again, we're going to wrap this around back to the TUATHA de Danaan and, Elena Danaan. So, fairies are spirits of nature. Whoops, sorry, I just had to check on my... Oh, okay, here we go. I'm back with it. Okay, Working with the Fairies, an Irish Perspective. This is from a year ago. Isn't that strange? This is a whole other post, and the person's name is Doitian Bergak 555. We were just talking about 444 in the last person's comment. I didn't even notice that before. It says, "Hello everyone. I have come aware that there are many Wiccans and pagans here on this sub, and many wish to work with the fairies. Fairies are spirits of nature. They represent its power, rawness, and beauty. They are creatures and beings that have been around since before the Christian era." That's the antediluvian age. The old world, we call it. I sometimes call it the old world. The old world, we call it in Europe. These spirits are powerful. Even the smallest pisky or pixie is much more powerful than a person. They are to be respected. They are like us, like they say aliens are. They are like us, neutral beings, all with unique personalities and perspectives. And they are all around us. It's why we always warn them verbally before throwing water. Remember, this is an Irish perspective. But they also tell the Muslims in the Muslim faith to not do your house cleaning and wash your dishes at night, because that's when the jinn are out and you may harm them by splashing water on them. Yeah. And maybe this is why the holy water, it's charged water. And maybe that's why it works. So there is a saying that I cannot say, but again, everything I talk about will be linked below. This is Working with the Fairies, an Irish Perspective. It's a sentence that looks Chugaibi. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what language that is. It's probably Gaelic or some old Latin language they used to speak overseas in Ireland and Europe and England and stuff. And okay, neutral beings, blah, 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 blah. Who was warned them before throwing water. The saying means mind the dirty water, basically, as it translates to. This should be remembered. Those of us in Europe who keep up the old ways do benefit from them. We sort of work with them in a way. On equinoxes, solstices, May Day, etc., we leave offerings to the local fairies. Yes, food, bread, all this stuff. November 1st, too, here in Ireland, is La Na Pukai, or Day of the Puka, Puka Puka, Pika Pika, where you leave the last of any harvest to the local puka. Offerings come in bread, dairy, grain, vegetables, and slaughtered animal meats. We always give a pig, grain, and vegetables on days of offerings. We also give offerings of bread and butter to keep them happy. We don't do that stuff anymore. It's like we forgot them, and now it's like we don't leave gifts and we don't share our foods, and so now they just have to watch us and wish that like they were able to try our sweets. They love sweets and shit too. So I do understand it to a degree, but again, I'm not condoning any behavior, but I can emphasize with both sides. Bread, grain, vegetables on days of offering, keep them happy. Setbane or Guth Nui is the first milk of the cow, aka, I remember this part, colostrum or claustrum oil, like the milk and honey, represents something else. But this is still the fresh milk of the first of a cow. When milking cows calve here, a pint of colostrum is taken and tossed out into the bushes where the fairies live as an offering. Any milk that is spilt on the ground is left to them too. We also leave scones and small cakes. They love sweets. In turn, we are left alone. They protect our livestock from malevolent spirits and bless the land. But it also says that if you mess with them, it doesn't say it right here, but I've read it many times, that if you mess with them, they will blight your cattle and stuff like that. And that's why I'm thinking like maybe some of these cattle are animal mutilations like that because they're eaten kind of like a sacrifice to feed these beings, you know? Whether, I mean, you've consciously agreed to it or not. They may just take it as an offering and continue on their business with protecting the land, whether you give them permission or not. Thinking like, well, this is the natural order of things, so we'll keep protecting the land. You give us a cow every now and then, and things, whatever. Who cares if the human says yes or no, whatever, you know what I'm saying? It may be like that, I don't know. But so a pint of colostrum, remember that claustrum's oil sounds a lot like that with the milk and honey, and that's what it's referred to, with the two oils mixing together. If you haven't researched the claustrum's oil yet, I have a playlist on that I suggest you look at. So, okay, taking off the fairies, any milk spilled on the ground. We can leave scones and cakes. In turn, we are left alone. They protect our livestock from malevolent spirits, and they bless the land. This is known as Craidna Sidney, or the fairy faith. Okay, there's still more. I'm just trying to think. As I was thinking, did I miss anything? It's the claustrum's oil with the milk and the honey. And they, in turn, may help you with your, your ascension, your Christ oil's ascension to the crown. So it says you should not, however, try to invite fairies into your home, especially if you don't know what you're inviting. There's many creatures that will pretend to be kind in spirit so they can get access to you and your home. Sprydiana and Amadan and Saluate all do this. Changelings also, but they get placed as parents' negligence by fear Dirg. Once in, they are almost impossible to get rid of, requiring a special medicine man or woman that we in Ireland have. Fear bien layer, aka fairy doctor. Oh no, I'm a spirit doctor too. You don't only have them in Ireland. I will cover these in more. I mean, I'm not the best, but I do all right. I will cover these in more detail at a later date. It goes on to say, basically, it's better to not build a shrine and invite the fairies into your home. You're better off sticking to offerings outside nature. You'll befriend them in this way, but not too much as though they take too much of a shine to you. Yeah, because then they might want to take you, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, don't fuck with the fairies, respect them, it says. And it says, feel free to ask any questions. Okay, it says, hi, this might seem a bit of an odd question. Would you know anything about leaving a glass of milk on the window overnight? The person says, I would. No such thing as an odd question. We normally leave milk on the doorstep or put on a rock in a field in other such areas, never by the window, or as it may attract unwanted guests. So you could pour the rock, or you could put milk on the rock and then put it in a field, but never by your window. Okay, let me see. Okay, is there any books super interesting? Is that all I wanted to read on this page? A lot of people report shenanigans in their homes and blame it on leprechauns and such. It says here, I have had a few many eves where shenanigans have happened around my home out here in the Irish countryside. Ever since I do not overlook offerings on May Eve, as I know they are real and as they are elemental in nature and are essential to the well-being of the countryside. Yeah. Oh, I've been being called back to the country and by the ocean especially so much lately. So okay, so listen to this. This is super interesting. The person deleted their account though, but the comment is still there. This is super interesting. I don't live in Ireland, but I think I may have had an experience with a fairy and one with another small being. But some people might think this would be aliens, right? I put out some food as a thank you for the other small being, and after that I had two more experiences, not wonderful, with the fairy. I sort of wondered at the time if there was some confusion with the food I set out, and if the fairy didn't take it as an invitation for her to come into my room and mess with me. Or maybe it could be another being, I don't know, but I'm thinking I won't put out food again. It says, did it stop after the offering was put out? Fairies inhabit most countries in the world with a suitable habitat. Fairy literally means spirit in Old French. Elena Danon's French. Fairy literally means spirit in Old French. They just go by different names and appearances in other countries, so you probably encountered something of this sort. I didn't actually read this part. I had to click the see more. So the timeline went, I saw a small being that did something helpful. I saw a little shiny blue lady a different day. A shining blue lady a different day. I put out some food for the small being, not the fairy, as a thank you. And I had 2 less than nice encounters with the shining small blue lady. The less than nice encounters involved her forcibly flipping me over and tugging on my hair. There was a wispy shadow thing there too. I've seen those, but it didn't touch me. That's, you get the fuck out of here from my book. Oh no, I'm not putting up with you. Get the fuck out. Remember, that's in my book. Get the fuck out. And I tell it to get out the closet. That was that. That's what he's talking about. I just seen a vision. A wispy shadow thing. Yeah, it shoots around the room. Yeah, they're very fast. But it didn't touch me. I guess I wondered if I had anything to do with the thank you food I gave the other small being. I do live right to a very, I live right next to a very large woods of acres called Forever Wild Land. So I'm guessing that would be suitable habitat. You're from New York, are you? The original poster says. So sometimes what can happen, fairies are extremely territorial. So you're better to leave an offering to all fae in the area you are in. Did you leave the offering in the house or outside? The dark figure sounds like something I'm not supposed to talk about because talking about them sort of brings them to you. Oh, well, all right, listen to them. Don't follow my lead. Or attracts them to you. I shouldn't say their name, but I'll type it. Don't say it out loud. You're putting yourself in danger. Oh, it's like a fucking skinwalker. Yeah, but we talked about that on my last live. Like, I came face to face with one of those one time. They're usually like a forest guardian. I see them run by sometimes. Where is it? I put it here. I showed it in my drawings the last time I was online, didn't I? In a live stream. I'm sure I did. I'm getting deja vu about it. And with the pale crawler. I know we did. A lot of people will see these within the woods, and they can shapeshift. I'm sure that's what we were talking about with this skinwalker thing. And yeah, they are, pretty nasty. Well, they can be. Depends on what your intentions are and what your business in place is doing. Oh, well, it's only just a small picture here. But let's see. Let's see if I can see myself here. That. And I mean, they do kind of look like aliens, right? There's Bigfoot next to it. But they kind of do, and they've got claws and everything. They can be very dangerous. Tall, lanky things, sometimes mistaken for Slender Man and whatnot, okay? But that's what I would assume the skinwalker or even the Wendigo would be. Sometimes you'll see them very high up in trees and such like that. So, okay, just let me mark my place where we were. Okay, so we're done with that one. And, okay, we are here. Let me see. Let me just finish this. Okay, so it's like the fairy version of Skinwalker. Witches and druids who were once people who became extremely powerful, fae creatures, through despicable and truly evil means. Witches and druids who were once people who became extremely powerful fae creatures. The werewolf and lycanthropy and whatnot. Hold on a second. Oh my god. Okay, so again, that's opposing force if you want to feel it that way. It's supposed to knock me out of my energy. So listen, what I'm seeing is because I couldn't figure out how people are shape-shifting into reptilians. you could probably shapeshift into anything that you truly wanted to or could imagine. Some people might become werewolves, some people might become reptilians, and they're doing it. I know exactly what they mean. You can become an extremely powerful Fae creature through despicable and truly evil means. Yeah, we know what this is. It's the child sacrifices and stuff. And the SA stuff. They're witches and warlocks and shit. Druids. It doesn't mean everybody doing this stuff's bad, but let's see. It could also be a shadow person that is common enough. But if it is that type, I would advise moving away. And if that's not possible, bring iron into your home and spread salt around the house. Yep, these are two things, and supernatural too, that I learned will deter most. Either one of those, iron or salt, either one of them usually works pretty good. Spread salt, but not like ionized salt. You need natural sea salt. Spread salt around the home. Probably get a Native American medicine man into, it doesn't have to be a Native American, but you want someone to be legitimate. It just kind of bothers me that, like, there are certain people that, like, why do you need to have family members and ancestors? That is ridiculous. It doesn't need to run in your bloodline. And that's disrespectful to others who don't have that. Then they're not taken seriously. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, she's a Caucasian. What does she know? No. The native person or the indigenous person, individual, they must know more. You know, and that's, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm just going to let it go because I got into an argument with the lady who I worked with on the school bus, and she's indigenous, and she tried to pull that shit with me. And I was like, not today. No. I don't think I'm better than you. You don't think I'm better than me. Now I'm going to shut up and leave that shit be. What is with the rhymes today? Tried to spit at me like I'm a piece of shit. No. Anyway, I just need a moment, please. 1 second. I've taken a lot of that, for all kinds of different reasons. You're not good enough for this. You're not doing enough for that. Blah, 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 my whole fucking life. And so, like, I know that I'm not the only one that has come to these types of conclusions and things, but it's just, my goodness, that hurt my feelings. And I don't care. The kids weren't on the bus or anything. We were alone. But yeah, that was the time when I was just like, oh, I don't like her anymore. If you're going to be like that, like, if that's part, like, it was these things that started to build up. And then she's extremely racist to the people at the Tim Hortons, like the people from India. Oh my God. Anyway. And I mean, yeah, like sometimes it could be true when people are like, yeah, my grandma was a psychic, my mom was a psychic, my great 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 grandmother was a psychic, her uncle was a psychic, all that shit. It may be, but a lot of people just say that to have credibility. Like, that's why they'll be like, oh, I was in the military, I briefed the president, I'm actually a doctor or whatever. And they're not. And people don't actually check their credentials. A lot of people have gotten away with that. So I'll get better back into a bit of a better mood, but it's just, you know, it's a shame that, people have used such deceptive, manipulative ways to get people's attention. And I mean, now I can I told you, though, many, many times that one of the first things I was told about the spirit realm is that it's tricky, tricky, tricky. And if it feels too much for you as an individual, it means that it's just not for you at this time, or it'll never be because you choose it not to be, or whatever it is. But I always suggest, this whole time I was suggesting, for people to do their own research, to read things, watch things, and educate themselves. So if you don't understand, I do apologize, okay? Let's see here, what are the time? Okay, I'm gonna take my hair back out. I don't really like it being out because it goes everywhere. Okay. But then it hurts when it's done like that. So, pulls on my strands. Let's see. So we did Tell Me Everything You Know. We did the working with them. Okay, because it is true. Like, a lot of priests, the things are sold that priests don't really work on them, and it doesn't. It only works on certain things, especially it will reflect upon the people in the home. You have to remember how much power you have inside of you. So people will argue with me and say, well, the name of Jesus has power. That's because this power comes from inside of you and your belief in goodness and the strength and the all-knowing and the omnipotence. What's that word? The greatness of the divine creator and the power of that, of the all father, or whatever, the father, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Because it is the source of all things, right? And the father of all these other beings. Well, the father and the mother, really, because it's the creator in both. And however you choose to see it is your business. But this is the parent of all creation. So, calling in that authority brings a power through you that is collectively out there as well, within as within, so without, right? And so this is why it has power, because it's the belief in that power. This is why people calling on other people's names, it works for them. And you will have cases like this. They will be following other religions and have different kinds of teachers or religious deities or whatever. And it will work for them. It's because it comes from the power behind it. It doesn't mean, it's almost like calling on the greatest authority, right? The Most High. And Jesus was a representation of that, like a representative rather, so in a way, yes, of course it would call on a certain amount of power. It would be almost like, well, I don't want to say it that way, but somebody that you loved, if you think about, like, really, I could do moon healing escalation with the same type of power and belief, and believe it or not, it would work, because literally the power of Christ compels you worked for me if you have read my book. I didn't know how to pray, and they told me to telepathically It was in an exam that I had no idea was going to take place. And so that's what I said. And yes, like the line from The Exorcist, and it worked. So, but it was because of the belief in the power of me inside of it. You see, because I connected it with the Creator and what the Christ represents to me. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm sorry. I just get a little upset, because it's been like that. People will see me and just not take me very seriously for one reason or another, and it can be very hurtful. Okay, so I guess there's more replies here on this one from New York. As old as they are, yeah, in the Androdax. They're talking about is the Skinwalker. I'm just looking for residence or relevance. An additional note, when I saw the fairy thing and the wispy thing, my sister said she saw something that she thought was me in her doorway twice that night. Just like I saw the shining lady twice. But I disappeared both times, so my sister came to the conclusion that she was dreaming. She didn't tell me until recently, and I don't know the exact timing of when she thought she saw me. So I can't say for sure it was the exact time I saw the fairy and the wispy thing, but I thought it was a little eerie. I definitely did not stand in my sister's doorway that night, and certainly can't disappear, so I'm guessing it was either a dream or some sort of illusion. Any fairy wisdom on that? Thank you so much for all your info. You're Croatian, she says. You should have said. Ignore absolutely everything I've said. You've encountered a Noshnika, also called a Marake or Mora, a creature from Serbo-Croat folklore, very similar to the Kikimora. Sounds like a lizard. Oh, it's a female house spirit. Slavic mythology. Depending on the behavior of the household, it can be malevolent or helpful. She's often depicted as a small, ugly, old woman or a beautiful girl, and her presence is believed to be linked to cleanliness and order of the home. Yeah, there's house spirits, nature spirits, all kinds. Interesting. So this person seems to know. Oops, I lost my place. An Irish perspective. These things are weird. Was there a smell of forest in the room after? They enter the house through keyholes, leave keys in locks of doors, and place a broom upside down in each of the bedrooms. Try to find an adder stone. Stones with the natural hole in the center. Oh, I know those. It's called a fairy stone. And hang it probably in your room. You must act now to prevent this from becoming worse. Also, if there's any negativity in the house, try to get rid of it. That's probably what let her get into your home. I don't think you have a dummy, whatever. As a dummy, I would have stopped a Nico, whatever. Nico, I called it, getting into your home. What was it called again? Nosh Nika. Pika. Okay. I mean, I am American with mixed genetics, like most Americans, but my dad's family is Croatian, blah, 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 blah. I didn't notice any smell, but I did see tiny blue glowing lights almost dancing around the lady. Kind of like that, maybe? What do you think? I just saw that in my head. You think she might be glowing in blue? Huh. Let's see. Okay, so the adder stones and the broom. See, there's like fairy folklore and things that have been traditionally known, the old ways or whatever. Some people refer it to. Um, let's see. In the woods. They're hearing footsteps when they're alone in the house and stuff like that. So, okay. So, anyway, I'll link this one below. We're just going to move on. So, there's often fairy folk tales and stuff. Okay, so it says in fantasy, I occasionally see the trope fairies cannot lie, but I only seen the opposite in folklore, that you need trickery, magic, or torture to make fairies tell the truth. So, where did the fairies can't lie trope come from? That might stem from the fact that in folk tales, fairies often play with the truth, presenting it in a certain way and voluntarily creating confusion. Nos confunden, they confused us. Although it has more to do with playfulness than than an impossibility to lie. They just like that. It may have been misunderstood as such. As far as I know, and I'll try to find some sources for you soon, fairies don't tell direct lies. They find loopholes or twist words so that technically they're telling the truth. And they're purposely making sure you misinterpret it if you know what I mean. And that's exactly what it is. That's what it is, purposely misleading, to be left open to assumption and the own interpretation. Oh, well, I didn't tell you that. So that's what they can say. I've mentioned this before. They find loopholes or twist words or play on words so that technically they're telling the truth, but they're purposely making sure you misinterpret it, if you know what I mean. So usually the human needs to outsmart them because they're good at playing word games and not giving straight answers. NASA, never a straight answer. Even though they never directly lie, basically they're master manipulators. A slightly different point of view here. Modern fantasy fiction carries the legacy of Tolkien. His elves were tall and truthful, rather different from traditional understandings of elves. I wonder if this has bled into modern fantasy. From a traditional perspective, fairies can be highly deceptive. If you can force them to answer a direct question, they'll reply truthfully. But the lengths they go to in avoiding are extraordinary, so I would say they can lie. Some theories about this include the idea that fairies don't have souls, so they can't deceive beings that do, humans. There are two families of stories at work here. Number one is the idea of tricky language widespread in many folk tales, some of which feature the Fae, others which don't. For instance, the story where a leprechaun promises not to move the marker from its spot over hidden treasure. He keeps his promise, but he creates so many identical markers that it's impossible to find the treasure ever again. Number two is the idea that the Fae value honesty. This shows up in, for instance, the Welsh story of Elidurus. The famous folklorist Catherine Briggs, in the Fairies in Tradition and Literature, 1967, summed up both of these ideas to say that fairies do not lie, but do trick using literal language. She also emphasized that it was dangerous to lie to fairies. My current theory is that the modern trope that fairies can't lie is a direct reinterpretation of Briggs saying that fairies don't lie. The oldest book I've found to use the trope is The High King's Daughter by Deborah Doyle and James MacDonald of 1990. The trope really took off in the 2000s. I just finished writing a blog post where I collect as many examples and sources as I could. Okay, in folk tales, fairies are part of nature. As a result, they are sort of magically bound to telling the truth. As a result, they will dance around the truth and using tricky wording to confuse you. For example, they may invite you to dinner, but you are the dinner. Just like they may think of you as their pet chicken, but then you become the chicken nugget. Yeah? Okay. We're going to move on to the next one. It's called the types of fairies. Fairies are often depicted as humanoid creatures with wings, but I recently learned that is just one of many forms of fairies. Can you tell me how many types of fairies exist in European folklore? I've spent years collecting sources on fairy folklore, ranging from contemporary collections to academic texts to works of fantasy to batshit insane nonsense written by English priests. And I can confidently tell you that no, nobody can answer that. Because there's no consistent definition of what makes something a fairy or what a type is or any of that. There are dozens there are dozens to hundreds of different creatures, characters, and societies in folklore that all fall under what some would call fairies. And they often have very few commonalities. Sometimes fairies are fallen angels, and sometimes they're ancient gods. Other times they're the spirits of the dead. In some places, fairies are the size of children, and in others they're the size of ants, and yet in others they're larger than humans. It just depends, you know. It's like I said, it's such a large category that it's so difficult to tell unless you yourself are there and know what you're looking at, you know. It's difficult. And that's why I feel we should all be educating ourselves so, you know, we can rely on ourselves. That's why I'm doing this, and I'm just sharing it with everybody else. So the wings part. Wings are a relatively late addition to the complex of traditions associated with fairies. Wings were popularized in Victorian art, although the roots of the image reach back a bit longer. Wings were not part of the pre-modern folk tradition. Remember, wings represent the higher dimensions. Remember I said that with my video with Xenosaga? So wings were not part. Oh, fairy is the name applied to some people to the social supernatural beings of Britain and Ireland. This would be like the TUATHA De Danaan and the Shining Ones. They have strong affiliates to similar social supernatural beings that are a part of folk traditions from Ireland to west fringe of Finland and from Brittany to Iceland. Following are some excerpts from my recent book. An image of tiny flying fairies contributed to the Victorian misconception that they had insect wings and fluttered about flowers like butterflies, little more than charming, harmless spirits. In British pre-industrial tradition, when the fairies flew, they did so because of a supernatural ability to defy gravity. What defies gravity but UFOs, right? Not because they had wings, which are a late artistic and literary convention. Nevertheless, the motive of wings became also pervasive that it dominated popular culture by the 20th century. And like I said, the wings represent the higher dimensions, like angels have wings, okay? But real angels don't actually have wings and flap them around, okay? They would be more like biolocation or like to teleport from one location to another, okay? 20th century, advocates of the spiritualist movement were convinced that the images of winged fairies captured by the Changelings photographs that were taken between 1917 and 1920 were actually depictions of supernatural beings, even though the wings would have startled people only a few decades earlier. Okay, so it goes here to show you about how lots of people have different words for these beings. So, as mentioned in the previous chapter, the shared inheritance from Sweden to Ireland and Iceland to Cornwall and Brittany included an assumption that supernatural beings, whether called pixies, elves, fairies, sidhe, holdre, trolls, or whichever, or indeed something else, lived in human-like communities. They say this is about the Jinn also. They live in communities, they have families, they have likes and dislikes. These are the beings of the unseen realms. By contrast, for much of the rest of the world, supernatural beings were solitary, or at most, they were described in pairs or small groups. Like you'll see a small group of gray beings, or you'll see two Bigfoot, or whatever. They were described in pairs or small groups. Even when found in limited numbers, they acted in a singular fashion and were not social beings living in communities, but they do. They actually do have families and communities. We just never seen them because it's probably in another realm that we just can't get to. The idea of families and societies of supernatural beings is a distinct feature which sets Northern Europe apart from much of the rest of the world, making it possible to consider a larger body of folklore as it is both unified and diverse. For example, many people describe their fairy-like supernatural beings as capable of invisibility. This was so fundamental that some of the names of the creatures integrate this feature. In Norway, there are Holdra folk, or hidden folk, that means, and Iceland uses a similar term for their indigenous elves, unseen realm peoples, okay? Underpinning the idea of size or invisibility is a notion that they have some characteristics that set them apart from humans. Many are so hideous that they are clearly perceived as different and dangerous, but not all have obvious grotesque feature. The Swedish Skogressa, or forest woman, and the Huldra, her Norwegian counterpart, on the other hand, are beautiful and appear normal to the human eyes, and yet legends describe men who become enticed only to realize that she has a tail of a cow or her back is hollow and looks like a rotted out tree trunk. Similarly, many Scottish and Northern Irish legends describe a man who happens upon a beautiful woman only to find that she has the ability to slip in and out of the skin of a seal. What does that sound like? A mermaid. Regardless of the nature of the supernatural being, well, actually, mermaids would look like a big-ass seal, to be honest with you. If you've seen how I think that they look in my last video about the portals, stargates, and dimensional beings, it's about an hour and such long. I showed that in there. Because they wouldn't have hair and they wouldn't look like us really, but they could put like seaweed on their head and pretend to be ladies in the dark in the water, pretend to be drowning or whatever. It could work. So where were we? Hollow, looked like a tree trunk. I'm going to describe a beautiful woman. Did they slip in the seal? Okay, yeah, the seal thing. Regardless of the nature of the supernatural being, people have stumbled into their realm because of some unusual situation. Like I said, you could just be out walking in the woods someday, and there's been many accounts of it that I've read and heard, people telling stories that you're like, this person's really serious. They have an emotional and physical reaction, you know, like you can tell like they're very stressed out or whatever, okay? All right, so let's see. Different and dangerous. Da, 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 da. Yet another way is that supernatural beings managed to avoid being seen was to dwell underground. Again, this characteristic inspired, and we just talked about the inner earth and the beings that dwell underground there, but these have been around for a very long time and they're not aliens. Okay? They're not aliens. They're alien to us because we forgot about them. All right? So, okay, the characters inspired for the names applied to them. The Irish refer to the fairies as Sidhe, Sidhe. That led me to finding that thing with Elena Danaan, which alludes to their living inside mounds or mountains. Similarly, the Danes and some southern Swedes call them Biersfolk or mound folk. Throughout Scandinavia and the widespread term birdtagging and its various various deviation denotes the I don't know, I think they spelled that wrong. Deviations denotes the abduction of people by supernatural beings who took their captives into the mountain. Yeah. Because this is what I was talking about, the sylphs, gnomes, undines, and salamanders. And I said that this is why we see UFOs going into mountains, under the ocean, into volcanoes. This is where they live now, in the spaces between spaces. You know, you might look in after the UFO's just gone in there and been like, where it's gone, where has it gone? But it's switched dimensional states. And if you were to go there, it might be a whole city in there, you know, kind of like the TARDIS, how it's bigger on the inside. Dimensionally, it could very well be. So, okay, stumbled right, and in taken into the mountain. Although this could be taken to mean to the mountains as a location, it generally meant that the supernatural beings took their prisoners literally into the interior of the mountains. In addition, there is widespread legend removing a building situated over ML 5075, removing a building situated over a house of the fairies, that describes fairies asking a farmer to move his cowshed because cattle dung was dropping on their table and spoiling their meals. The farmer obliges, but the importance of the legend here is that it reveals a general assumption that fairies could be living anywhere underground, not just mounds or mountains. Another way that supernatural beings could avoid detection was by their diminutive size. This explanation for how they remained elusive only worked where people believed they were in miniature form. So it's like how you think it is. If you believe they're small, they will be. Like they'll know what you think about them and act accordingly. So they remained. This explanation for how they remained elusive only worked where people believed they were in miniature form, like leprechauns, gnomes, little tiny beings. Besides the Cornish, many other people thought of fairies as being small. The Irish famously referred to them as the wee folk, and for the Danish, they were known as the puslinger, which also refers to their small size. At the same time, tradition typically maintained that small beings could become larger and could greet people in ways that made them appear to be normal human beings. The principal distinction between one culture and another is whether pre-industrial people thought of supernatural beings as spending most of their time in a diminutive state and small. In Norway, Iceland, and Sweden, they were generally human-sized. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed. People that look like us, like the Palladians, but they look human-sized. While the Irish thought of the fairies as capable of being little, they did not see them as consistently small in the way that the Cornish and Danes did, so they could probably shapeshift and change their size. Cornish legends attest to the idea that whilst fairies were generally about knee high, they could shrink even smaller. And as Bottrell records in and Bottrell records in the fairy dwelling on Selena Moor, there was at least some belief that each time a fairy changed into the form of an animal, it became smaller. The petite nature of pixies inhibited stories about romance between the two worlds, but the difference in size could be overcome when the supernatural being took a larger form. So they can come and romance people during the night, like an extraterrestrial boyfriend. There were other occasions when Cornish pixies assumed human size. For example, in the legend of a midwife or nurse summoned by a stranger, the woman realizes the stranger is unusual only when she sees him at the market. The narrative, which is widespread in Northern Europe, consistently ends with the astonishing discovery that the husband of the woman giving birth is in fact invisible to everyone but her. And that's them creating hybrids. They can become physical for some time, maybe even long enough to mate, and then they would need to go back into the unseen realm. Yeah. So the wife would be looking at somebody and talking to them, but she is the only one that can see him. And she said, "Well, I'm talking to my husband, but no one else can see him but her." Yeah. But before that final incident, there was nothing about the father, the mother, or the babe or their baby to distinguish them as peculiar. This shows how amorphous belief and tradition could be, even in areas where indigenous fairies were genuinely believed to be small or hideous in some way. It was believed that they could also transform to appear like human people, normal human people. There are also Cornish legends that portray pixies growing to a gigantic stature. Maybe this is what I remember of all those giant beings that were just impossibly large. You know what I mean? And like we were all fighting and stuff like that at one point. Like these beings were very big. Like I'm talking like Attack on Titan size, and that big ass giant was looking through the wall there. I'm talking like that, and you're like, "Whoa!" It take like 10 people to take that thing. So like, unless somebody shapeshifts just as big as them. And I mean, even if I was big, but I mean, I didn't like getting that big because what do? You destroy the rest of the civilization, you know? I would have picked that effer up and flown him away from the civilization for sure. Yeah. But anyway, it was a wild time back then in the old world. But it makes sense, as to where all these beings came from. And, I mean, let's just move on to finish this here. So has a fair number. They're humanoid types. Okay. So in Welsh we have the Twyla Teg or fair folk. According to folklore, the Twyla Teg do not reproduce, but instead kidnap mortal children and replace them with changelings, which the mortal children grow up in the other world to become the Twyla Teg. There's generally 5 groups of them who look and behave differently from each other. Fairies in the mountains that resemble hags. So, like the lady in the white dress with the wet hair, fairies in the mountains, or it might be their Gradgig and river and lake pixies, home cleaning fairies like brownies of Scotland, only really like playing pranks on priests. Uh, Goblin-like creatures similar to knockers from Cornish myth, living in shafts and quarries and warn miners of cave-ins, like trolls and stuff. Pygmy elves that feed on limestone, often called fairy butter, and poisonous toadstools. Oh, okay, so these are different types of fairies. That doesn't include all the Welsh fairy-like creatures found in stories of folklore, like that of the creatures told in Annalise Cumbriae, who were smaller than humans and of green skin. What do they sound like? Little green men, right? Aliens? Mm-hmm. Who had an abundance of gold and had a king. Oh, they're goblins. They hated the ways of humans, lying, cheating, and congregating in churches, and they had their own unique language. Okay, there's no direct answer to how many there are. Like I said, there's probably just as many there are as there are species of insects, fish, birds, and mammals, and all of that. And even, us as humans, how diverse we are. There's probably that many out there of these types of nature spirits, elemental beings, and like the Fae or whatever. But really, it's just higher and lower dimensionals. And it says the last comment here is says TUATHA de Danaan in Ireland is also known as the good folk or the gentry. Human appearance, though more beautiful and taller than humans. I had done research on the TUATHA de Danaan, whatever that is, a few years ago, and it is with my Anunnaki video. And so I connected that together a few years ago, but it's interesting to see it come up again. So I'm going to read you this next part, but I'm at this part I stopped where it says, like humans, the Fae have an unhealthy obsession with things that are bad for them. For instance, we love sugar, alcohol, and tobacco. And in my country, we love loaded guns left within reach of toddlers, even if that puts our lives in danger. This is what this person's saying, probably American. On a more serious note, no offense, Americans. However, Fae were understandably more prevalent during the Bronze Age. See, as time goes on, it like waxes and wanes. So it'll be stronger at certain times and not in others. So it's more prevalent during the Bronze Age, and were only toppled as a dominant culture when those weak but numerous mortals started employing the use of iron. Now here's the kicker. Fae can't wield iron, right? But their human kids can. The Fae can't win a war against iron-wielding humans, but their super hybrid iron-wielding soldiers raised to learn fairy powers from infancy can. Someday, once they have enough kids, they'll be back. Wait and see. This is exactly, I read an article years ago that the government was worried that these aliens are creating an army to overthrow them. But listen, what I found with all of this, I'm going to tell you something before I get up and take just a little quick of a break, is that if something seems too freaking good to be true, it is. I'm telling you, I was in a really bad way, and I was so sad growing up, and it still feels like I've been black sheeped from humanity. I've been outcasted, kicked out, and unwanted and all that. And I know that I was feeling these things for such a long time, and I believe that this is what allowed this type of interference, and it had to be aliens for me. It had to be, because there had to be other people out there than what I experienced here. I needed it for me to even keep going mentally, because I was having such a terrible experience with my own people, with humans, that it hurt so bad to feel rejected, unwanted, unwelcome, like the ugly duckling of the village. And it was just I didn't understand what I had done wrong, or why people didn't like me, or why they treated me so different. So it was very, very difficult. And like I had mentioned earlier, I thought that if we got rid of the evil in the world, then people would just be nicer, and they would have a easier life, and it would give them less reasons to be mean and cranky and nasty to each other. If the evil was gone, maybe the rest of us would have an easier go at it. Does that make sense? I hope so, because it's a strange feeling that I've had all these questions all over my entire life, and what this kind of stuff is. And it's funny because me and my best friend, when we were young, we're talking about fairies and stuff when we first met. She was 9 and I was 10, and you know, um, it's just it's funny because of course she came over from England and they would have the legends of fairies and stuff. She even had a little movie that was about two little girls that seen fairies and their dad goes away to war and something. I'll have to find it. It was such a cute little film. We watched it on VHS. But anyway, it all starts with that. Then it kind of ends up with the same thing. Like, I mean, it makes sense. Like I said, that it's almost like they give you this UFO experience and they sit back and watch what you do with it. And it may not necessarily be 100% nefarious purposes. Like, I do think that they want us to rise to meet them, literally, like self-education. And like I came to the realization before that most people are just going to hear what's coming out of my mouth as crazy talk, and they won't be able to interpret what I'm saying because it's not for them, and they haven't self-educated themselves enough to be able to be on the same page with me. Crazy is just something you don't understand yet. So it's not that I'm feeling this way. I just know that what I'm talking about is a little bit, not in an I'm better than you way, but an advanced subject for someone who has no experience with this at all. Yes? But I mean, somebody has, at least an individual should have something. There's even people that say, oh, I saw an angel or blah, 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 blah. Well, it may not have been an angel, because the angels do not interfere, whatsoever. But there are, I mean, unless directed by the divine creator, I suppose. Although, again, I'm not an expert. So why I'm digressing like this, I don't know. But let's see, where are we? So I know, okay, yes, you are, okay, we did that one. We did the types of fairies. I went down to the bottom. Yep, we did types of fairies. And then, okay, so we're on the last. Go and save those people. I hope they're okay. May the divine creator bless them. God bless them. Get there quick. See, those people don't get out of the way. They're honking like that because people don't move out of the way. You believe that? That's something, ain't it? Like, if that was your relative, you'd want people to move out of the way, right? Goodness gracious. Okay, so we read about someday once they have enough kids, they'll be back. Wait and see. And that this is what the whole starseed thing is about. There may be a lot more to it than we realize. And I know I always use this one as it was the only religion, though, that had any type of stuff that dealt with this. When I told these Muslim ladies in this woman's living room, because I had on the hijab, I had dinner with them, I'd been going to the masjid, the mosque, and I explained to them my story about seeing this being in my room, that I was convinced it was an alien, but they knew it was a jinn. They knew, and they were right. And they're like, yeah. And then, because they explained what some of them look like, and the big black eyes is a thing, and they're jinn. But then again, I had to do much more research about it, because these people, and, I'm not judging them for it, but they don't really deal with that. They kind of leave that be because it's not, basically, they feel that's not their business and that's not what they do. That's not part of, their faith. They kind of just ignore that and shun that away as something that's bad, for the most part, like a negative thing. Now, there's different Muslim-like faiths. I forget what it is, but I'll post stuff. Everything I talk about, I'll post below. Anything that's about the jinn, yeah, that guy is going to come up with his videos. He does a lot of really, really good videos, this fella. But I don't think he's actually Muslim. It's like something else. But they say assalamu alaikum and all that. It's similar, but it's not the same. It's like mystic Judaism, like the Kabbalah. This would be mystic, like Islam, kind of, a little bit like that. So where was I? Oh, in the Jinn. Oh no, I've lost my train of thought. Uh, Crap. All right, well, just let me take a little bit of a break. Mm, I was just talking about something important. Okay, in Islam, I was telling them about the Jinn. They knew already. They actually were happy to hear it because they said, and this one lady was crying with joy, and she's like, "Because it reinforces our faith." Yeah, it like helped them believe more, and that one lady was like, "I've never actually met anyone who saw one. I've heard stories my whole life. They were very fascinating, very loving to hear it. They were very good to me and kind and informative." Um, but it turns out a lot of the things they said was correct. Um, so yeah, they they hear stories like this, but they know what it is, you know. And I mean, I think that by praying 5 times a day and all this stuff, I think that it might be like protecting yourself energetically. Even it does seem like this, cleaning yourself even energetically. They even have like a shower ritual that you get in and cleanse the hands 3 times and this side of the body 3 times, wash the face and over the head 3 times, well, you know praying and all of that. And yeah, I mean, I would bless myself in the shower for years and years anyway before I even knew that they did that. So all right, I'm pretty sure that's where I was going with that. um, that they're the ones that I explained about, the sexual assault, and that happens a lot with the Jinn. It's because they have sexual desires like we do, and given the opportunity, they will have sex with a human. Mm, and that if I wear clothing and bless that clothing, pray before bed, which I was praying before bed anyway, but sometimes I went to bed naked, um, a lot more than I do now. But because when it's too super hot, there's no freaking way I'm putting clothes on. So whatever. If I go astral traveling nude, whatever. I'll fight the whole damn army nude. I don't care. Um. So all right. Yeah. Yeah. That reminded me of the starseed thing, and like how they're making them feel like your families are not your own, and maybe they're not. Maybe they're not, because well, mine literally definitely wasn't. And I think it was an easy situation, take advantage of vulnerable people in pain. But then again, I kind of thought of it like a rescue. And that's what she says here, that she was rescued by these beings. Now it's, I don't know, what if they set up the whole thing to create loyalty and this type of bond? You know what I mean? I've heard them do this type of stuff. Like, even with Travis Walton, there was a blonde haired, blue-eyed fella that came out to make him feel more comfortable because of the grays were there. I've heard this happen quite a bit, because they're a little bit more pleasant looking for most people. All right. Well, just give me a second here. I shouldn't have just worn my Barbie pants or whatever, but I just got up and I wasn't planning on being seen. Wear something nicer, I guess. But like I said, I didn't plan it, and I just wanted to I wanted to get this done and over with. Okay. So with that being said, I'll be right back. Ugh. I'll let you back outside in a few minutes, Mark. You want to go back outside, Mark? Want to go back outside, Mark? Here you go, baby. It's raining, but you can sit on the steps. Yeah, it's raining. Okay, let's continue. Let us continue. All right. It says this one here is, why do fairies kidnap humans? In one of my last posts, I mentioned that fairies were actually the bad guys, due to the fact that they often kidnap people by stealing their names. But why? In mythology, a fairy's main weaknesses are iron and salt. Iron hurts them, and salt cancels their magic abilities. So, FYI, if you think that anyone's done any magic using your name, write your name on a piece of paper. Get a bowl with natural sea salt. Pour some sea salt in there. Pour some water. Mix it around. Okay? You can do one of two things. You can leave it in a bowl, or sometimes if it is a significant something, like if it is causing a lot of trouble, something that would be stronger, you can put it in a pot with water and salt and boil it with your name on a piece of paper and prayer, cleansing the incantation, curse, or magics off of you. Yes, this works, and this is why I just thought that, yeah, because I've done that and it worked for me. Salt. Human blood has iron in it, and human sweat has salt in it. So why would a fairy ever want a human anywhere near it? Isn't that like a human going to hell, finding the most dangerous and toxic demon in the land and bringing it home? Why would you endanger yourself like that? Also, on a side note, can you imagine the look on a fairy's face when they went to a city of any kind? Like their main weaknesses are used in buildings, and their other weaknesses is used for eating. Okay, this is a brainstorming post. Apple seeds have cyanide in them. Why on earth would people eat bags of them on purpose? There isn't enough iron in your blood to bother the fair folk. Otherwise, red caps wouldn't do what they do. They kidnap humans for reasons that are entirely their own. We might be able to explain some of them, but honestly, the drive to have a strange and erotic pet is reason enough for us. One day you're the chicken, but the next day you're the chicken nugget. Um, if you were to ask a human why they had a parrot yoinked from South America and raised in captivity, they wouldn't have a better answer than, "It is a pretty talking bird that's neat, so I got one." And then it goes on to say the blood does not contain enough iron to harm the fairies because the proportion is too small. To harm a fairy, you need pure iron, and it must be cold iron, not forged in a blast furnace. Therefore, an extent to which steel can harm fairies is limited. Human iron tools choose to add other metals in order to increase their strength, which makes their influence of artificial iron tools on fairies weaker. I think that forged iron is something outside of nature, while the iron in our blood is part of an organic compound and therefore still part of nature. I once read a story where the Fae promised the iron in the earth that it would never be mined and forged, and humans came along. But the iron decided to blame the Fae since they didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and now it is actively trying to harm the Fae. It goes on to say the concept of iron hurting or repelling the supernatural is a lot older than blast furnaces, and we didn't see a sudden resurgence of them when the methods of producing iron changed or we switched to steel. Cold iron is any worked iron craft and shaped by human hands. I reckon it ferromagnetism they don't like. I think the notion in folklore might relate to the transition between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Certainly, it goes back a long way before blast furnaces. This conversation goes back a year ago, by the way. I mean, I think traditional folklore even says why. It's just there to keep the kids out of the forest so they don't get eaten. Oh yes, like we tell kids with if you're not good, Santa Claus won't bring you toys for Christmas, right? And there are some things in our history where it's used for like to keep children safe. They will make up little stories and such. Um, so a human child might be taken due to many factors to act as a servant, the love of a human child, or malice. Most often, it was thought that fairies exchanged the children. In rare cases, the very elderly of the fairy people would be exchanged in the place of a human baby, so that the old fairy could live in comfort, coddled by its human parents. Now, you'll see this with human hybrids and stuff like that. They'll breed with human beings, and then they'll take the babies. Um, and it can be traumatic to the mother. But it makes sense to act as a servant, so that they can receive the love of a human child or the malice. Most often, they exchanged the children. So this is for changelings specifically. Most people think that this was a way to explain childhood deformities and neurodivergence, because most of the reasons were being too smart for their age, acting erratically, or being unable to do certain things. For other cases, I think it's often punishment for trespassing, as they'll rarely be the ones to instigate. So yeah, it's to keep kids out of places. Sometimes they'll say, don't go in there, the fairies will get you and stuff. There is like sayings of that, but then there are cases where people go missing into these other realms. That's what that's talking about there. They would often steal human women as midwives to help deliver fairy babies. They also would steal them to actually carry their children, as they were not fecund, maybe fertile. They couldn't have babies of their own. This is how the lore of witches came about. Often enough, it was said they taught the midwives secrets of plants and other magics in exchange for helping birth their children. Just to point out, there are no actual examples of fairies stealing names. It simply isn't attested in folklore. Names have power, but I have yet to find an example of a fairy stealing a mortal's name. Elena changed her name to Danaan. What if by changing it you give your original name up? Like by changing it legally because she wanted to be known as Elena Danaan, not Helena, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Hang on, what was her actual name? Yeah, here it is right here. Her name is Dr. Helena Zacharias Delaporte. Delaporte. Her name isn't even Elena Danaan. That's another name. I don't really think fairies kidnap mortals. Generally, they kidnap a character who is already in Faerie, which I don't think is the same as trapping a mortal inside. So they usually take their own. That's what I think they're saying here. Also, I haven't seen examples of fairies being harmed specifically by touching iron. In folklore, iron objects are placed in certain places, horseshoes above doors, for example, and this deters malevolent spirits. I can't think of examples of physical contact. The iron horseshoe is a warding symbol. Regardless, you are trying to find logic in magic. People not know that every body contains iron and salt, and even if they did, I doubt it would ever change how fairies act towards them. So, because they love and taste, they take humans because they love and taste the taste of baby flesh. Like I said, witch has iron in the blood. That fairies aren't weak, we get cold iron. It seems cold iron, okay, so keep in mind that it's really hard to give a real answer to this, because it's like asking what a dragon looks like. Yeah, sure, Fae are all magic people who live in the woods, but there are regional and time variations. So different civilizations, I guess. That, and also it would depend on the Fae. Some may eat them, others may Oberon in the play wanted a cool, adventuring kid because it's nifty, like a little pet, I guess. Also, about the blood and sweat, typically in fantasy movies, it has to be a real piece of iron. Anyway, so, because sometimes they will. Um, okay, so it's, yeah, like, why do they kidnap humans? The same reason people domesticated cats and dogs, like for a pet. Yeah, we've heard that before with the extraterrestrials. In European mythology, the Fae folk operate by a very different kind of logic to humans. They don't care about wealth, power, control, ownership, and things like that, while putting a premium on things like manners, behavior, promises, lies, gift giving, tribute, and so on. For example, Tomte, the Norwegian dwarfs of the David the Gnome variety, you'll likely never see them if you live near one. They appreciate hard work, neatness, maintaining a good home, and treating animals well. But if you have a tomte neighbors and you mistreat your animals or your home, for instance, by pissing in your barn while it's raining outside, a tomte is likely to find a quiet moment where you're alone and kick the shit out of you to teach you some manners. Yeah. Changeling children had a wide variety of supposed explanations, really, ranging from punishing human parents to obtaining human servants, or even as a means to give elderly fae a comfortable cottage place to live out their remaining years of life being cared for by unknowing human parents. I remember reading a story where fairies lacked the ability to be creative. So they kidnap humans to create new things for them. In the story, they were especially fond of artists of every kind. I just saw a flash of Claudio Nocelli in my head. Maybe that's what Helen Morris is. Continues on to say, um, well, someone says if we could go to hell and bring back a hellhound or something, you can't honestly think we wouldn't do that, because we would, and yeah, we would. Fae folk is a massive umbrella, someone says, that includes what we would traditionally associate with elves, goblins, and plenty of other things. Fae that kidnap people might do it for a variety of reasons, such as raising the child as their own. Generally, Fae are rather alien in concept to traditional moral standards. See, alien to us, but not actual aliens. It's a play on words. So it depends on the lore of why they take humans. They can get them to mine silver, do slave work for them. They can take them because they can't have kids. They can take humans to sacrifice for continued immortality. They can take people for fun and profit, like human slavery, we've heard of, or they can take them just because they want to unalive them. Because people want to lie, and there is. So sometimes, people will make up stories to cover up traumatic events. We know this, and they'll say, well, I was taken by the fairies or whatever like this, or the aliens and stuff. So we know there's stuff like this. So there's this mentioned at the end of that comment. Like humans, okay, yeah, the fae have an unhealthy obsession. I know this, I read this before, with things that are bad for them. But now I want to read this part again. Now here's the kicker. The Fae can't wield iron, but their human kids can. The Fae can't win a war against iron-wielding humans, but they're, or like the guns, with iron bullets even, but they're super hybrid iron-wielding soldiers, like super soldiers, with the alien thing and the MK Ultras and all that. Super soldiers is what reminds me that of. And that is what Max Spears was. And he died like that. Didn't they say he was killed by mysterious elements? Remember that? So someday, once they have enough kids, they'll be back. Okay, so because a lot of the time they do take kids, young kids. So it's funny, maybe childlike innocence gets them high. A child's imagination powers their magic. They don't want to, they're just compelled to do so because it's in their nature. These are the reasons why they could take humans. They barter the humans for goods and services. We're central to their economy. And you hear about this with even Elena Denon says that they have human slavery or the slave trade or whatever, and they're taking people and they trade for goods and services or whatever. Yeah. hmm Swapping changelings and humans to keep the portals between our worlds open. If everyone were on their correct sides, the portals would close forever. It's interesting, isn't it? Fairies are long-lived, but not very imaginative, so they must get bored, right? So they gotta play with other people. The games they play with each other are the same games played for a long, long time, and the skills they have cultivated they mastered long ago. Humans, on the other hand, live short lives, and each one is different. They each play games differently and are different shapes and sizes. They know things that others don't. Some are curious, some are defiant, some are strong, and some almost know everything, and others, well, they don't know much unless taught. So do the fairies. Humanity is chaotic and unpredictable, and that's why they kidnap humans in order to make life interesting. Like that one. The Irish answer. The reason fairies are so few is because 9 times out of 10, their children are born as sickly creatures and usually die near birth. So the fairy mother will steal a human child and replace it with the sickly changeling fairy, worth nothing. Though this is basically what is said. Yeah, this was the legend that they would say what happened when a child was born with Down syndrome in Celtic Ireland, okay? So because, yeah, there was sometimes this happening. Like women would say that my real child was taken. It's in order to cope with it mentally too, right? Um, Sometimes I like to consider that humans can be everything fairies are not. They're impulsive, accidental, lying. On a more positive palette, they can be loyal, willful, and impatient. More often than not, humans have a mortality that fairies naturally lack. Fairies are conniving, mischievous, and prone to stealing humans away for personal entertainment. And on our end, we're fascinated with the fascinated things we should stay away from. True that. Simply put, we're complex to each other, drawn to a flame like a moth. Humans possess more morality than fairies. Why do fairies kidnap humans? For mating purposes. The Fae folk need to gain resistance to iron. Oh, the real word would be genetic code. So they're upgrading their genetic code, like eugenics, someone says. Elf, we will create the ultimate life form. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Okay, well, there is some headcanon out of the internet that we humans must seem to those fairies to the animal kingdom. Consider how humans interact with the animal kingdom. From the animal's point of view, it's crazy and unpredictable, illogical, untrackable, and makes no sense. You're likely to get killed and eaten in a stew or skinned while the crazy humans laugh and they're nice about their nice animal skin collection as you are to meet a helpful, kind human that takes you aside, sorts out that mayo jar that's stuck on your head, and pulls the thorn out of your paw, or just out of nowhere sets up a wildlife rescue in your neighborhood. So there are good and bad humans, right? So this is why there will be good and bad unseen dimensional beings, right? So keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind that humans keep pets also, and humans domesticate everything we can. And we also keep wild animals as pets, including tigers and other things that are not actually pets. And we have zoos, and rich people have their own menageries. Yes, absolutely. If it were possible, there'd be a line of humans waiting for their chance to tour hell and bring back their own special pet demon. Yeah, plenty of humans are fucking crazy like that. Yeah. Maybe the fairies have their own brand of bug nuts eccentric pet enthusiasts who just like to keep humans in their collection. As to our salty sweat and iron blood being enough to harm elves, that's the iron blood is the iron is in the blood of most creatures. The salty sweat isn't that all mammals? If you make that effect, okay, edited for typos. Anyway, all of this, if you haven't found it interesting, I have very much. It gives me an idea, too, of how these things connect together. And like I was saying with my last video with the portals, the fairy rings, everything in this circular, it represents the cycle of ages and things like this. Everything's coming in to being connected together. Okay, so I've got to wrap this up here. Have we done everything? Fairies treat humans the way humans treat animals. I can agree. Okay. I like the idea, Fae being bound by rules. Fae cannot take human form unless they have a human name. So they kidnap humans to force them to give names to Fae. Like Thorhan naming him. Fae cannot enter the human world without being invited in, so they kidnap humans. Oh, no, okay. Okay, no, this isn't, like I said, this part, well, yes, there are, like I was talking about before, or metaphorical things. So, like I said, about keeping people out of dangerous places, and it even says, like, they would tell, like, all right, the real truth isn't pretty, this commenter says. Trigger warning. For those who aren't able to handle this, it says the truth is not pretty. You're missing the point that all the fairy stuff, this is metaphor. Fairy stories were told in more barbaric times to hide advice so that little girls in small towns would not be SA'd by outsiders. It isn't pretty, but these are the facts. First, they are called fairies because they are vain assholes. If you dare to point out that they aren't, they'll fuck you up. They might even look pretty, but they are monsters who trick people and manipulate them. Second, being spirited away by the fairies is a metaphor for being kidnapped and SA'd. This isn't even a European exclusive thing. There are always messed up myths in every country similar to this, such as girls being taken by the Tengu in Japan, the snake god myth in Korea, or vampires. Iron kills them for the same reason a good stabbing will halt any want-to-be SAist. Packing heat reduces the crime rates also, same as women with some good cutlery. Salt could be a religious thing, as salt was used ritualistically to ward off evil. However, I think it might be more likely a lesson on how to avoid being, date ard. Explaining primitive date art drugs is a chore because salt can be used to explain so much about this. Saltless food could be seen as a sign that they didn't use proper preservation methods of the time, meaning that it will cause food poisoning. Food poisoning is something that can be used to drug women, along with many primitive witching methods involving poison. Ever hear of love apples? Yeah, this. Since it's the most popularized examples, vampires follow all the same trends. Vampires need to be invited in. As for not crossing rivers, that's because rivers were often used as borders, and them transversing them could cause an incident. These warnings are so kids are wary of strangers in the times. Yeah, people would make up stories like Santa Claus and stuff. That is true, but this isn't all that it comes from. It comes from other stuff too. And plus, like, even if I heard, or, my kids heard me telling a story, oh my God, I ran into this in the woods and blah, 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 blah. And, how kids are, telling them how dangerous it is and scaring the shit out of them about it would keep them from going in there. You know what I mean? Mm. Even if you knew it wasn't, and that there's just other dangers in the woods, but going to look for that one thing could put them in extreme harm. So these types of stories, I'm sure, will will be told. My understanding is that the folk tales date back before the Iron Age, when we lived much more closely with nature, which is harsh and cruel and scary, where you're one bad harvest away from disaster. People go missing, you never know what happened to them. Children who seem perfectly healthy suddenly get sick and die. Oh yeah, of course, there's unexplained reasons, so you blame like fairies or devils or different things. Hmm. One commenter says, they don't kidnap humans. They only take what they believe is rightfully theirs. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, so they would steal children and leave a changeling. Slaves to their instincts and impulses. That's why they steal. So yeah, it's like saying that the jinn have the same desires, wants, and needs as we do, the beings of the unseen realm. They're not all bad, and some are good, and some are not, and they all have different agendas and motives. When Fey motives are understandable, the reason to kidnap is usually some sort of vendetta the victim is tangibly connected to. The victim is taken to hurt somebody else. Okay. So October 29th, 2021, fairies weren't always cute. They used to drink human blood and kidnap children. When most people think about fairies, they perhaps picture the sparkling Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, or the other heartwarming and cute fairies and fairy godmothers that populate many Disney movies and children's cartoons. But these creatures have much darker origins. They were once thought to be like undead, blood-sucking vampires. In The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies, 1682, folklorist Robert Kirk argued that fairies are the dead, or of a middle nature between man and angels. At first it was the angels, then the jinn, and then humans. They are the middle children. And yes, they are of civilizations that have come and gone. They lived here at one time, long ago, before humans were ever thought of, because they were created before us. This association, particularly prominent in Celtic lore, writing in 1887, Lady Jane Wilde popularized the Irish belief that fairies are the fallen angels who were cast down by the Lord God out of heaven for their sinful pride. And the devil gives to these knowledge and power and sends them on earth where they work much evil. At first sight, the current innocent idea of fairyland seems as far away from the shadowy realms of the dead, and yet there are many resemblances between them. Despite their wands and glitter, fairies have a dark history and surprisingly gothic credentials. So, why did we lose our fear of fairies, and how did they become associated with childhood? How fairies lost their bite. When J. M. Barrie's Peter Pan debuted in the early 1900s, it was widely believed in society at the time were inhabited that fairies inhabited a shadowy spirit world. Fascinated by angels, ghosts, and vampires, Victorians, subsequently Edwardians, increasingly saw fairies as the souls of the dead. Rather than dispelling fairies, the First World War and the loss of many loved ones heightened a belief in airy spirits and occult methods of communicating with them. However, due to Peter Pan's great success and the prominent pixie character Tinker Bell, the creatures would eventually lose their malevolence as they became confined to the nursery. Barrie famously equated the origin of fairies with children. When the first baby laughed, its laugh broke into 1,000 pieces, and that was the beginning of fairies. This is far from the malevolent fairies and their shadowy history and folklore. In these stories, they steal children, drive people insane, blight cattle and crops, and drink human blood. Barrie, of course, was aware of their dark side. Despite the fairy dust and glamour, Tinkerbell is dangerous and vengeful, like a deadly fairy temptress. At one point in the story, she even threatens to unalive Wendy. Peter Pan, or the Boy Who Would Not Grow Up, debuted on stage at Christmas in 1904. It was inspired by performing fairies in popular shows such as Seymour Hick's Bluebell in Fairyland. Peter Pan was canonized by Disney in 1953, and the sentimental celluloid fairy was born. The cutesy and youthful fairies of contemporary children's TV are the result of Disneyfication. Blood-hungry demons. But in folklore, fairies are often a demonic or undead force, one which humans need to seek protection against. A folklorist, Catherine Briggs, has noted in her Dictionary of Fairies, wrote, "People walking alone at night, especially through fairy-haunted places, had many ways of protecting themselves. The first might be sacred symbols by making the sign of the cross or by carrying a cross, particularly one made of iron, by prayers or the chanting of hymns, or by holy water sprinkled or carried and carrying the strewing churchyard mold in their path. Bread and soul were also effective, and both regarded as sacred symbols, one of life and the other of eternity. What is more, Fairyland was hungry, has a hunger for human blood. Fairyland has a hunger for human blood. This links fairies to the vengeful dead and to vampires. In early accounts, vampires are defined as the bodies of the dead animated by evil spirits, which come out of their graves in the night, suck the blood out of the living, and thereby destroy them, as it entering the Oxford English Dictionary from 1734 noted. Diane Purkis's histories of fairies includes a Scottish Highland legend which warns you must bring water into your house at night, so the fairies don't quench their thirst with your blood. Very old fairies, like vampires, were said to wrinkle and dry up without fresh blood. The Babohen Sith, like in Star Wars, the Sith, are vampiric Scottish vampires. These beautiful green banshees have hooves instead of feet. They dance with and exhaust their male victims, then tear them into pieces. Like many fairies, they can be killed with iron. It's almost like a siren, and like they would be water fairies, basically, like the undines, like, and they lure men to their deaths and crash the ships on the rocks and stuff and such. Derg Du, and Irish vampiric fairies or red bloodsuckers. They were thought to be influential on Lafanu's female Where are you, you little flea? Not him. Where are those? One looks like a flea. Hold on. Do they drink human blood? Let's see. Oh. But I think those are little ground beings anyway. Where are you? Over here. Must be up further. They're like these little fellas that crawl on the ground. I can see them in my head, but I can't find them right now. I know that the little chupacabra is a blood drinker. Yeah, see, these are the little people right there. But they're not little people. They're fairies. Lang visitors, northern people, though the elves and fairy folklore is about a mysterious little people. Yeah, they are. They're not elves and fairy. Like they're dimensional beings, but they're not aliens. They never abducted humans. They rescued a very large amount of people from the reptilians. Yeah, sure they did. They're 2 feet high. Yeah, it's the same as some of these beings, but I don't know where those little fellas are. One looks like a flea. Sorry, everybody. Maybe I'm just not meant to find it. I don't know. Probably find it when I'm not looking for it. But I've described it. They're 2 little creepy crawling looking fellas. They look like 2 bugs. One looks like a flea. I find them all the time, and when I'm looking for it, I can't find it. See, something like that. You see, but it's not that one. It's not that one that I got the vision of. That is so irritating. Where are you? There's so many little goblins in here. They look like, to me now, I can see them differently. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where this is, and I'm getting really irritated. Come on. Showed the fairy girl. Where are those little things? What the fuck, man? Oh, it must not even matter. I'm getting so irritated. They're like little beings that crawl on the ceilings and stuff. Run along the ceiling. I've almost checked the entire book. I know that I'm not hallucinating. I didn't imagine it. I'm really getting irritated. My fingers can't turn the pages. That's impossible. I'm almost to the front of the book. No, that's not possible. They can't just be missing. No, it's on a little page. They're like two little bug creatures. One looks like a flea. I'm sorry. It's really bothering me. I'm not making it up. I'm not imagining it. I know that these creatures, I saw them in here. It's just a little drawing of them too, and there's the two of them. I can see it. Where are they? That's crazy. Makes me look crazy. That's why I'm looking so hard, because I know for a fact there's these two little beings. This what? Are you for real? That's no. Oh my fuck. They wear Chris, blah 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 blah. Well, where was the one that said it was confused with the chupacabra? But anyway, it doesn't matter. These were the ones that I was seeing because they look like fleas. And look at this one with its fangs. Bloodsuckers, like that one with the little tentacles. Anyway, I'm frustrated with that. That was really irritating for me and probably for everybody else. Oh, my first video was so much better, even though this one is longer. Okay, they drive without fresh blood, red bloodsuckers. Okay. All right, it's enough of that website. Okay, so from fairies to aliens, abductions, changelings to ships in the sky. following, and it won't let me read it. So I'll put all this below. I'm tired now. I hope that wasn't a letdown, like where I've just kind of, like, it's been 3 hours now going on and on and on about this. But I hope that it helps and it opens some people's eyes to the similarities of the Fae realm or these spiritual realms, the Jinn. I'm making the connections that it's all directly linked to back to the same thing. So I hope that was good. Again, everything will be posted below. With the connection to the aliens, again, that are not aliens. They're only alien to us, like I did in the reading. Archelios, Wizard of the Sidhe. Yeah, this is just a creation. To be creative with it, to like tell people about things in a manipulative way. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. I am exhausted. So, yeah. Take care, everybody. Thanks for being here. I know that I made it so that no one would be able to even see that I was live. It's like unlisted. But I just didn't want to be chit-chatting and everything like that. No offense. I really needed to get all of this out. Okay? And put it out there for people to review. So, again, you can go ahead and I greatly encourage you, because there are here the laws of the Fae: speak no false words, break no oaths, harm no outsiders, things like this. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here, twisting the rules. All Fae are expected to follow these rules in good faith, although they often look for excuses to bend the definitions. For example, speak no falsehood means Fae cannot tell lies, but most Fae lack omniscience. This is generally interpreted as do not knowingly speak falsehoods. These differences are slight and unmistakable, and allow many tricks that a clever Fae can use to gain an advantage in a battle of wits. So yeah, I would encourage you to read up on all of this, and I will try to catch up with you all again soon. You may not see this until a little bit, I'm not sure. But if you do, like I said, I hope you enjoyed your weekend. This was supposed to be released after the Dogman video, but things just didn't work out. So here we are today at 3 hours instead of when I could have done 45 minutes, and then people would have actually listened to it, right? So I'll have to try again and make a video. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye. Oh, here, I'll just write, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Take care. And everything, they will be posted, which people don't check, even though I say this all the time, in the pinned comment. And, well, I gotta put the description first. In the description and pinned comment below the video. Everything I talk about will be posted in the description and pinned comment of the video below. There. You take care, everybody. Thanks for being with me today. Bye.